Well, it's summertime and everybody's publishing their top 10 lists. So the question on our minds today is, does Utah have a legitimate top 10 player anywhere in the organization? Should somebody be on these lists? Also, what's the holdup going on right now with the Salt Lake City Smith Group agreement? We'll talk about that and more coming your way on the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast.
You are Locked On Utah Hockey Club, your daily podcast on the Utah Hockey Club, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Tom Callahan, Robyn Leaño. We are excited to talk to you once again here as we are indeed locked on the Utah Hockey Club. And Robyn, it's August, and we are going through a bunch of different topics on our shows right now, but still putting the content out there. Want to say thank you to everybody who's listening in right now. I don't know which topic you want to tackle first. I feel like we could kind of get off in the weeds on either one of these, which is kind of the fun of it being August. But there's a little bit of meat on the bone either way. So I will let you choose. What direction would you like to go first?
You know, when you brought it up, I feel like it's really good to cut and kick things off talking about this arena renovations hold up. A lot of people probably have questions. What's going on about it? Because we're about 30 days, like a little bit less than 30 days since since Salt Lake City officially endorsed the project. So they would get sent over to the state, and then the state would have 30 days to review. But we're now at the end of that window. What's going on?
So this is the interesting part. And I did a little bit more reading into this because I saw little nuggets popping up here and there in the news about what's going on. Is there a holdup? If so, what is the holdup? So it turns out that the understanding, at least that I had initially, was incorrect. And I have now clarified my understanding. The 30-day window does not begin when it was approved. The 30-day window begins when the plan is submitted to the committee. Now, the committee has not met yet, and both parties, both the Smith Group and Salt Lake, decided to push this back because most of the people who are involved in this committee, after it was approved initially, basically took off to Paris because they went to the Olympics to finish shoring up Salt Lake City's bid for the Winter and Paralympic Games. And so they weren't there, and they wouldn't have been there to be able to meet in time. So those folks are starting to return now. So the reason the document hasn't been submitted, and we're kind of maybe looking at a timeline of around next week now to submit it. Once it goes in, then they have 30 days. There's no real hard deadline after that, except to say that if they want to implement this tax for 2024, there's a December 31st deadline for that. That is the deadline to impose a new tax. So that is really what the holdup has been, is Salt Lake is trying to get that Olympic bid shored up. And once they take care of that, then they will come back and they will convene. So the plan will probably be put in next week. The 30-day window opens at that time.
You know, that certainly makes sense, especially when, like you said, there's still things that need to be made. When they announced that, they took, all right, we need to make sure we can meet with the Olympic Committee, kind of make sure all the other, some of the finer details, the initial finer details. Again, there's probably a lot of things that still need to be taken care of. A lot of things need to get taken care of. Again, we're still 10 years out for that. But they said, like, all right, let's go ahead and get, hash all this out, while the entire Olympic Committee potentially is in one city. So let's do it. Let's get it done. And that's good to know, though, that they didn't submit it for that reason. They kind of were holding off on that, knowing very well that the Paris Olympics was coming up. They're like, okay, we need to kind of work around this a little in some ways, kind of focus on kind of making sure it's still able to get done in a timely manner and not kind of just pushed to the back burner.
Here's the other interesting thing too, Robyn, about this as I was reading into it. Because it is considered a consumptive tax, once this is approved, it can go in right away. It's a 0.5% tax. And because it's a consumptive tax, whatever that means, I don't know. But under state law, it can go in right away into effect. So as soon as it's approved, boom, 0.5%. The interesting thing about the agreement, in exchange for that 0.5% that is going to be tacked on, then Utah Hockey Club agrees to a ticket surcharge fee that will then go back to the city to help work on housing projects for the less fortunate. So, they feed back into the city that way is kind of a, thanks for the help on this. So one hand washing the other here,
Plus a
but
lot of other things too. Like I think
well,
what there's
yeah,
also like a Japantown revitalization. It's like, all right, part of this program will also help revitalize Japantown, and we'll do all this. It's it's not very much unlike what was kind of like proposed for when the Coyotes were trying to get Tempe, right?
sure.
They were focused on, it's like, all right, so there will be this, and like, and the city will get X amount of money from ticket sales, or from the ticket percentage, or whatever it might be, and that will go to traffic studies, or go to education, or go to whatever. So kind of the same thing, but in this case, well, let's just say Utah's closer to actually being done. It's almost a sure thing. It's just some of these finer details got to taken care of.
Yeah, and so once they get that wrapped up, then everything will be on the way. The other thing they do have to do, they did say, because they have to change the zoning,
Of
so they
course.
expect to do that by the end of the month. And then the other thing is they have to raise the maximum height of buildings in this area. I think it's from 450 to 600 feet. Not a huge deal, though. They've already done it for downtown. They raised the maximum height allowance in downtown already. So there's precedent, shouldn't be a big deal. And it's not like they're going from 450 to 1,000. They're going from 450 to 600. So, I mean, are those potential stumbling blocks? I guess. But to me, it pretty much sounds like the path has been cleared. And once this is on the tracks, everybody gets back from Paris, they'll pick a day to meet. It should be able to roll through from there. So don't fret too much, is what I'm telling you if you're a Utah Hockey Club fan.
No, certainly not. And again, as you said, because as you mentioned, there is still all those timelines. Once the state receives it, they got that state committee, receives it. Then they got that 30 days to send it back to the city for their final approval, and then enacting that tax, as you mentioned, by December 31st. There's still some leeway. There's no massive rush, because look, what do they want to do? They want to get things started. At least they still want to get that tax enacted, but they want to get things started this summer, right? The moment the Jazz and the hockey club are done for their first for their season at the Delta Center, it's like, all right, let's tear up one of the ends and get things started right away.
Yeah, I guess everybody needs their chance to harumph over this one politically, just to make sure they take a look
Of
at
course.
it. But I mean, the team's already there. We're kind of, I think we put the cart before the horse on this one just a little bit, but I can't imagine a scenario where it gets shot down, but I guess you
Plus,
never know.
again, let's keep in mind that the Olympics now showing up, they've got an even
Right,
bigger incentive to get this
right.
done.
Exactly, because you want to get all that done and in place. And there's always more construction that goes around hosting a Winter Olympics. I don't know how much of the infrastructure is still there from last time, but I'm sure they're going to want to put up new dorms, a new Olympic Village. Venues need to be updated and upgraded and all of that. So there's
Yeah,
there's plenty of work that will go into it.
we're talking at that point, what, 32 years would have passed since the previous Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City. Like,
Yeah,
that's a decent amount of time for sports venues and other kinds of venues to age, especially if they're not really in use a significant amount.
it's wild to me how disposable some of this stuff is. Honestly, I remember going up to Whistler in British Columbia. They had Vancouver hosted the Winter Olympics, and all the skiing competitions, etc., were up in the Whistler area, and there's just these giant, pretty much mostly empty buildings that were the dorms, just kind of hanging out there. They were thrown up very fast, I guess, as cheaply as possible. And it's almost like World Cup soccer stadiums. Like everybody still complains about everything in Brazil. They built that one stadium on that island, millions of dollars going into the construction of a stadium that was used literally 3 times and abandoned.
Yeah, it's like the one in the middle of the Amazon.
Right, and the
Like,
only way you could get to the island was by boat or by helicopter, and now it's a giant aviary just rotting out there on this island.
yeah, it's wild, right? It is really crazy that that's actually, that those happen. The Olympics, it's a little bit less so because you can then recycle some of those because there's some of them are smaller venues. You can easily use those. It's a lot harder with the World Cup is a whole different animal, and it's a whole different animal again
Yes.
because you're talking about these mega stadiums being built up.
Yep, and in some cases, just abandoned, and they're put up fast. I don't want to get into the whole politics and or the corruption involved with all of that stuff, and I mean I'll never be able to play in those circles, so I don't even I can't worry about it. I can't even know what the worry is at that level, but I just I know that when it comes to an Olympic venue and what it can do for the city, and then the further use of the infrastructure, I think cities are getting smarter about their bids now and doing a lot more to ensure that when they do build these facilities, they are able to reuse them in smart ways going forward, as opposed to just having wasted dollars put into it.
I mean, take a look at the joint, and this is my last thought before we kind of wrap up to the next topic, Tom. Take a look at what that tri-national or whatever the World Cup coming to U.S., Canada, and Mexico. They're kind of working together because they're like, all right, we got stadiums. We all got stadiums already. We'll just renovate the hell out of them and make them ready for World Cup standard soccer.
Yeah, and I think that it's kind of fun for the nations. Like Canada would never get a World Cup on its own,
No,
but it's fun for them to get some matches, and the United States can get some matches, and Mexico gets some matches. I love it. I love that idea. I think it's fantastic.
it's gonna be really awesome. But we still got more to get to on this episode, Tom, of Locked On Utah Hockey Club. Let's get to those top 10s. Does Utah have a top 10 player? Well, we'll get to that right after this.
And part of today's Locked On episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Thanks again, everyone, for making Locked On Utah Hockey Club your first listen every single day. We are free and available everywhere you get your shows. Tom, this is an idea that you brought up, and getting those top 10 countdowns. And again, we talked about being a dog days where it's like, what is something to talk about? Oh, top 10 players, top 10 swingers, top 10 centers, top 10 D, top 10. Like, they really get really interesting. I think even at one point they even did top 10 arenas to play in. Like, it's but that does bring the question, does Utah, as it stands right now, have a top 10?
So we can start from the net out. And I think a lot of the Coyote / Utah Hockey Club fans took umbrage with me when I said that Connor Ingram was not a top 10 NHL netminder yet. He's not.
Look, he's good. Is he good? Yes. Is he elite? No.
Right, and that is the jump he may make, and you hope he makes, honestly,
Sure,
and you don't really wanna
absolutely.
have to go shopping. It's much cheaper to shop in your own store, if you will. I hope he makes that leap this year. There were flashes that maybe that happens this year, but also there were times where you think, all right, well, I'm not really sure here. Defensively, the team has improved. That will improve your goaltending. If he's able to make the jump to elite and become a top 10 goaltender, fantastic. But for me, Robyn, I don't think in net right now the Utah Hockey Club cracks the top 10.
As of right now, no, I would agree with you on that. I'm like, again, I like both of these, both of the goaltenders right now for Utah. I think they are fine. They are good. They get the job done of what the team current needs are. And again, as you mentioned, I would sure hope down the road, maybe this year, Connor Ingram takes a significant step forward to maybe just on the outside looking into that top 10, maybe even break into the top 10. I would love to see that, but maybe he's still maybe a couple years away. And the thing is, he's still a young goaltender. He's still a really young goaltender. Still got some years to be able to kind of focus on that and get to that level. Goaltenders take a long time to get to that elite level.
Yeah, and 27, he does have plenty of good tread on the tires yet. I imagine probably in the next couple of years is when you're going to start to look to him to approach his peak, which is why I think it's such an important year for Vejmelka, who's a year older. So they're getting to that point. But again, you have another 2 years with Ingram to see at a budget price, I would add, too, a value signing to see if he's going to get there.
We'll certainly have to see. Again, I have the hopes. I have the optimism. I try to be an optimistic person. There are a lot of times in which things don't go my way, and it kind of goes, makes me feel the opposite, Tom. But I like to consider myself an optimistic person, and I think talking about these goaltenders is there's no exception to that rule.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair. And I mean, we're gonna go through the lineup here in a minute, and I think that there are some fans who are going to want to argue, Robyn, that for reasons they could place, their favorite player in whatever top 10 category, and just, oh wow, they're underrated, or they're off the radar or whatever. And that's fine. If you want to support that in the comments, if you want to come at us on social media, feel free.
Feel free to.
That.
And I know there are some people who probably think we're wrong on some of these, but you know what? That's okay.
And that's fine. I mean,
yeah,
I got big shoulders. I could take it. So yeah, feel free to flame away if you want. That's fine. I think defensively is where we could make the best case for someone in the top 10. And I think that, I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's Mikhail Sergachev at 26, 8.5 million is not cheap. What you're looking for is, the continued offensive output. And again, last year is so hard to gauge because a little more than a half point a game, but only 34 games. Now, before that, in 22-23, the last full NHL season, 79 games, 64 points looks pretty good. 54 assists looks very good. Now you're getting into borderline elite territory with Sergachev. I wouldn't mind Sergachev on my fantasy hockey team. However, based on last year and coming off the injury and us not 1,000,000% knowing what we're getting here, I don't feel comfortable placing Sergachev in the top 10 of NHL defensemen. I would love to change that opinion by Christmas. I just don't know if I will.
Yeah, but it's one of the things that I think has been asked a number of times and I think a lot of us will share that same sentiment. The potential to be a top 10 is there for Mikhail Sergachev. Like we've seen
Absolutely.
what he's capable of. He is a phenomenal puck moving defenseman, but
could be elite,
but we can't see him reach that potential because he reaches that injury bug. He's at the point in his career like, all right, well, see where he, I really like. I think a lot of eyes are going to be on him this season. New team, passing those that injury bug. Can he do it? And can he kind of lift up this Utah blue line? I think that's a huge thing. And again, I'm with you. I would love to put him at a top, place him in that top 10. Not quite yet, again, because there's still so many question marks.
Honestly, if he doesn't get hurt last year, he's not even on this Utah team, in my opinion. I think he has a full season, shows he's a big value, but Tampa Bay probably would have leaned more towards keeping him. Were they able to? Now, obviously, his salary was a problem for them to keep him because they wanted to make the play on Jake Gensel.
Yeah, that's a big chunk of money.
There. And I mean, they let Stamkos walk, but you're still spending money in other places. And again, don't forget, Tampa Bay was what, $9.5 million over the cap 2 seasons ago in the playoffs, and I think this year they might have been close to that again over the cap. That's why they had to stash guys on long-term IR. So
yeah, that's why kind of Kucherov made the comments that he did a few seasons ago.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. Look, it's legal, right? If I'm not complaining about it because other teams want to use that loophole too. It's there for a reason.
Yeah, and if you don't want it there, like you can try to make an argument in the CBA to close the loophole.
Yeah, they're going to go for it out. Yeah,
no, I mean, probably not.
Players aren't. No, why would players go for that? Then you got one less guy getting paid. The players aren't going to go for that.
No, of course.
So I don't know, but that's me looking at the goaltending and the defense. I don't know if you want to hit a break before we get into the forwards or not.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go talk about the forwards right after this. And today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down and we get fewer games, the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this is around the time in which I always love placing bets on baseball games. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official betting partner of Major League Baseball. So let's keep going on these top 10. I kind of figured things out, Tom, for this Utah team and top 10 players in certain categories. We talked about the goalies. We talked about the defense. Now let's go ahead and talk about that forward group. And I think this might be where it gets a little bit interesting and see where maybe where our minds are the same, where they differ, because we're talking about a decent chunk of forwards that you could make an argument for, but we'll see. But I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, I think the guy that you circle first is Clayton Keller, right? You have to look at Keller, who in 22-23, 86 points in 82 games, fantastic. Last year, 76 points in 78 games, good. You want point-a-game guys, but where does that rate Clayton Keller? He is tied for 34th in the NHL in points with Victor Hedman of the Lightning. So players in front of him, Gensel, Trocheck, Hyman, Suzuki, Robertson, Barzal, Barkov, Stamkos, Bouchard, Bratt, Marner. Jesper Bratt had more points, 83.
Yeah.
Marner, Yossi, Thomas, Kachuk, Pettersson, Aho, Point, Makar, who I love Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, Sam Reinhart, Forsberg, Crosby, Kaprizov, Nylander, Miller, Rantanen, and then Draisaitl. Now we're into the 100-point guys. Draisaitl at 106, Matthews 107, Pasta 110, Panarin 120, McDavid 132, McKinnon 140, and Kucherov finished with 144 points last year. He had 100 assists. Both he and Connor McDavid had 100 assists. They both had more assists than he had points. So
that is insane.
Yes, that is a really, really good year. So Keller might be the guy now. However, I know that you have a particular favorite hiding on the roster who you've talked about before, who is a young 21-year-old forward who might be the guy if he has a bit of a breakout season here, that we might be talking about a little more, and might actually challenge Clayton Keller for the top dog spot, maybe on this Utah Hockey Club.
I mean, you can certainly make the argument and see what right now how much of a jump quickly like that Dylan Guenther can make, right? And like I said, I've talked about him numerous times about him being a true goal scorer. That dude can score goals and he can do it. He can definitely make a push for it. Maybe getting to that top 10, not quite yet. But again, look, he's like you said, he's only 21 years old.
Right.
He is so young and has a really incredibly bright future. If you were to say maybe, top forwards under 24, I'd probably be like, you know what? You can make an argument for him. You can make an argument for him right now.
See, that's one of those lists, like the 40 under 40, 30 under 30. We're doing it for hockey. It's the 4 under 24, or the 10 under 24, whatever. Yeah, maybe. I mean, as far as, let's call them the young guns. Okay. The young guns of the game. Absolutely has to make that list for me. And one thing that I like, and it's, you pointed this out as well. I had, in my time in the minor leagues, I had two guys who actually kind of surpassed each other for the all-time minor league scoring record in Trevor Jobe and Kevin Kerr. And I remember talking to Kevin Kerr one time about how, his philosophy was about scoring and shooting and all this stuff. And I asked him, I said, what's really led you to your success? Why do you have so many points, so many goals? And he said, I will shoot from anywhere. It's like, there is no bad shot for me. And he mentioned our coach at the time. He said it drives him nuts because he hates that I will fire a puck from a foot off the goal line towards the corner of the net just to see if I can get it to go in. He's like, but I can't tell you how many times I've scored on that shot in my career because goalies don't think you're going to shoot, because you get a deflection, you get a bounce, something happens. He said, I just shoot from anywhere. And I think that if Dylan Guenther, who has a great shot, and also, I mean, TJ Ginla, we talk about his shot, he's got an elite shot. But if these guys who have those elite level shots learn to use them and start to pick apart NHL goaltenders by getting themselves into the right place at the right time and then letting it fly when they get a chance, I mean, that's pretty encouraging. So I don't know that the Utah Hockey Club at this point has maybe even a top 30 forward just yet. Maybe all right. Keller's in the top 30, let's say.
Yeah.
But man, I have a hard time moving him up any higher than that.
I think a lot of it, what makes things difficult, Tom, in kind of grading this Utah Hockey Club team, is that we've been following them and how they looked like in Arizona over the last few years.
That's correct.
And it's a very different situation. Again, is it the same team this year? Mostly, yes. But they're only getting older. Maybe, and again, I don't know how much that's going to be, how much of a factor specifically the lack of consistent talk of, what's going to happen when you guys move or we potentially relocate or any one of that looming over their head anymore. I certainly would hope that that's something that didn't get to some players' heads. But again, it's some players are human. They still do things like that. It's just like probably will get into their head at some point, maybe even for a brief moment. Now they don't have to worry about that. Maybe they're focusing on, all right, just making sure we can get this team, from to compete for a playoff spot. And I think that's the other thing too, is because this team has been rebuilding. So there's a lot of lack of talent per se that they started off with. It was one of the least talented teams in year one of the rebuild. And no one was shy of saying that. Like, yeah, we know it's one of the least talented teams. They're young, but their ceilings are high. They have a potential to be great in about 5 years from now.
Right. And it was not a hurry up and see if we can accelerate the timeline project at any point along this learning curve. They've just had to learn by doing. It's been painful sometimes, but they have been learning and they have been improving. So I kind of want to wrap up with this question for you, Robyn.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a different conversation for us at the end of the year?
I would sure hope so.
Is somebody making a top 10 list? And if so, who's your player?
I would sure hope so. And I really think that that to me, and it's a player that again we've talked about numerous times already, and you already mentioned his name, Clayton Keller. I just see him being that leader and helping, like, even if it's not goals, right? Even if it's not goals, he's gonna be pretty high on that points list, whether he's helping out, maybe dishing out helpers to Logan Cooley on the power play, or to Nick Schmaltz on uneven strength, or whatever it might be. He's gonna be there, and he's gonna be the guy. And there's a reason I've been high on Clayton Keller. Probably one of the best on ice presence for at this point. Consider him a veteran player because he's been on the team for a long enough time. He knows these guys kind of. So I'd like to see him up there. And then as mentioning from earlier players too, Tom, I've got high hopes for Mikhail Sergachev.
I am going to go actually with neither of those. I am going to talk about Connor Ingram. Ingram finished last year with a 291 goals against average, and I'm going to do a deep dive on this. I think at some point in August, I'm going to go.
Of course, the goalie goes for a goalie.
I'll go deep into the goaltending on this, which I normally, like I say, I'm not normally a fancy stats guy, but I think I can explain out some pretty good metrics here. But to get into the top 10 of goals against average, your last year's marker was 2.58. So let's round it to 0.4 goals per game per 60 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Over the course of an 82 game season, and I realize he's not going to play all 82 games, but that is not quite 33 goals. It's 32.8. Let's go ahead and assume out of those 82 games, what's fair? 55 starts? 60?
I'd say that's fair. That's 50. 55 is a good
okay,
number.
So 55. Then we end up with 22. So 22 less goals to increase his GAA 0.4. That is what needs to happen. Now, I think with a better defense in front of him, he can give up 20, 30, 40 less goals. So that GAA comes down. Now the question will be, and this is where I'm going to do the breakdown, save percentage in certain situations and the high danger chances, all that stuff. But if the D is that much better in front of them, if they're a half goal a game better, Connor Ingram's a top 10 goalie this year.
Now
think about that.
I was thinking about that. Are you enough of a stats person to also kind of factor in the expected goals against per 60 minutes, kind of how that factors in?
Oh yeah, I'll get into all that. I'll get into the possession metrics. I'll take a look at that stuff. That is not a simple project.
Oh no, advanced stats, hockey fans, Utah Hockey Club fans. That is a topic we can go for probably an hour on, because that's a deep dive. Advanced stats is a deep dive.
And don't forget, there's a project waiting for you, or you need to submit a project for the Utah Hockey Club. You could win an internship with them. So, I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Your deadline's coming up here in a couple of weeks, but yeah, if you, they're offering a paid remote half-season internship in analytics with their hockey ops. I think that's pretty cool.
Awesome. Any final thoughts before we close things off?
I'm just interested in hearing what everybody else thinks. If you think a different player may be poised for a breakout season, if you think Sergachev is top 10 right now with the numbers that he has, I mean, feel free to throw that at us. But whatever you want, I'm always open to hearing the feedback from folks.
Fantastic. Well, that's going to be it for today's episode of the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to leave a 5-star review, to leave us a comment, like, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube, SiriusXM, ad-free on Amazon Music. Don't forget to interact with us also on social media. We are on X, Instagram, and Threads at LO_NHL Utah. I am at Robyn with _ Leano. It's Robyn with a Y, RBYN_LEANO. Tom Callahan is at Callahan on air. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode, and we'll see you guys next time.